Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Romanoff, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on digital identity and age verification. I am the Global Director for Policy at ACM, where I have the distinct honor of working with Michel, who is the chair of our European Technology Policy Committee. He'll be moderating today's event. I just want to give a quick overview of ACM. As the largest computer science society in the world, we try to bridge in our policy committees the research that is being done in computer science space with the policy that is being enacted by governments around the world. We have a broad reach. Our Technology Policy Council has regional committees both in the United States, in Europe. We're launching one in India and Latin America. And we have our expanding regions, which we encourage members to join if they don't feel that they're represented in those regions. But if you are coming in from those regions, I'm sure a good many of you are coming in from Europe, please feel free to reach out to me or Michelle to get more involved. We'd love to have your perspective. A couple of notes. If you have any questions during this meeting or during this presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them live in real time. We'll also reserve a little bit of time at the end for Q&A if you want to engage the panelists at that time. But please feel encouraged to drop the questions that you may have in the chat. And with that, I'll pass it off to Michel.
Hello, thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. So I'm Michel Beaudouin-Lafon. As Tom said, I'm the current chair of the ACM Europe Technology Policy Committee. The rest of my life I spent as a professor in computer science at Université Paris-Saclay, next to Paris. And my topic of research is human-computer interaction. And I've been involved with ACM for a long time, and in the efforts that ACM does in informing policymakers about the beauties and dangers of digital technology for a number of years now. So as Tom said, feel free to ask questions during the discussion, and we'll try to take them as we go. So today the topic is going to be digital identity in Europe. We'll probably end up talking in particular about the issue of age verification, which is one of the uses for digital identity, but one that is talked about quite a bit these days. And let me introduce our two panelists. So I'll start with Julie. Julie Dawson is Chief Policy and Regulatory Officer at YOTI. I think she'll tell us more about what YOTI does, but it does digital identity and age verification. So Julie leads the regulatory and government relations at YOTI and steers ethics frameworks development and liaising with the YOTI Guardians Council. She serves on a number of boards, such as the WEF Digital Identity Innovators and Global Coalition for Digital Safety. She's a member of the IEEE Children's Advisory Group, the OSTIA Online Safety Tech Industry Association, and the Tech UK Digital Identity and Public Sector Board. And if you want to add anything to this, Julie, please feel free to do it when we start the questions. So welcome as well Dame Muffy Calder, as a professor at the University of Glasgow and a distinguished leader in computing and emerging technology governance. So you served as vice principal and head of the College of Science and Engineering at the University of Glasgow, and you are now a senior visiting fellow at the Center for Emerging Technology and Security, CETaS, at Glasgow as well. You were chief scientific advisor to the Scottish government a while back, and your research spans computational modeling, digital twinning, automated reasoning for complex interactive systems, responsible AI, advanced analytics with applications in privacy intrusion and national security. So you've had many advisory roles, serving on the UK Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology, deputy chair of the REF Panel B, for those who know the UK system, and a member of the UKRI EPSRC Council, and as I mentioned, Chief Scientific Advisor for Scotland. And finally, you are also a Royal Society Leverhulme Research Senior Fellow and the recipient of the Suffrage Science Award in Computing Science and Mathematics. So we have two very senior participants here. I'm glad for that. For once, the gender balance is against me. And so we're gonna start off the discussion on this topic of digital identity. And maybe I'll start with Julie to just give us a very quick and broad sense of what is digital identity and what is its role in age verification, and also what are the methods for age verification, age estimation, age inference. There are a number of nuances here that I think many people are maybe not familiar with. And so just paint a broad picture so so everybody knows a bit more about what we're talking about.
Sure, sure. So just on my other hats, I am the co-chair of the Age Verification Providers Association, which is probably the most pertinent for today's discussions. So if you were to ask a consumer, it's really helping them to look at how they prove who they are, and then with age, how old they are. But really, digital identity is broader. It's a trusted, normally verifiable set of attributes about someone. And normally, one would think that's issued and authenticated, and that would then allow you to do different things, access services, prove you're eligible for something, maybe do secure transactions. Some people, particularly citizens, will think, what different attributes is this? Is it because I do or do not have some form of government issued document? Is it because I've got other credentials from driving, from education? Maybe I've got attributes due to my profession or role. They might also think of other identifiers through things that they do online. So it's really different if you ask one of the identirati versus if you ask somebody, who's a member of the public, and quite different in terms of the technical language, where those of us involved in this world will cite trust frameworks and standards. And so I think, what's useful is to really think, what does a citizen want to do? And what is a citizen getting out of this? Because without that, that's why we have a strange position that in many instances there aren't the clear business cases, and people haven't really looked at where is the trust for the individual around the use of their data, and what is utility for a citizen, what is it they're trying to achieve. So that's the lens with which I think it's useful to look at this.
Okay, and so Muffy, can you tell us a bit about age verification and what this entails, how it connects with digital identity, and sort of what is the picture of what we're trying to achieve there?
Could I say thank you very much, Julie, for that framing? I think it's really helpful, particularly to think from what does a user want of this, rather than here's something that we can provide. And I suppose the underlying thing that, so I'm, despite being on this panel, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm not an expert in digital identity per se. But when you're going to do any activity involving some part of age assurance, you're opening up a new threat surface because you're going to have repositories of personally identified information. And that's sort of the key underlying thing that we all need to think about. So my interest in age verification is not in general, but it's specifically when using it as a gatekeeper to access online content. So it might be something that's it is something that's restricted by age. I don't think it goes the inverse. It always has to be, you have to be over an age rather than under an age. But and the point that I would want to make is that age verification should be a separate process and activity from the provision of the content, so that a content provider shouldn't be able to be doing the verification. And the reason I would say that from a user point of view is, first of all, it's not necessarily in their interest to stop people accessing. And second, if we allowed the content providers to do the age verification themselves, that means they would have to be retaining some form of personally identifiable information. So then they are subject to new threats. So that I'm very much of the mind that age verification has to be a separate service. And then we have content providers. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say it yet, and I feel strongly that they should be separate. And we should be very much considering the process of zero knowledge proofs for the provision of credentials to the online providers. I'd be interested to see what Julie says about that. I'm sure she's got
Yeah,
lots to say about it.
thank you. Yes,
Please.
a few points there. So, absolutely, I would say pretty much all of my co-members in the Age Verification Providers Association would be very happy with that approach that would avoid organisations marking their own homework. And looking at the sort of independent review. I think it's interesting also to look at how all of this has evolved from verification that stemmed more from the KYC, know your customer, anti-money laundering checks, probably in the gambling industry really about 15 years ago. And then from there, where it was really looking at people over 18 that had an activity history, so they could provide credit reference history data, they had documentary proof, they might have other signals about themselves through electoral roll and voting. In the last decade, what has evolved is an understanding not everybody has access to government issued data, and not everyone feels comfortable using it in every context. And that's where in the last sort of 5-7 years, you've had more estimation and then inference approaches. So the umbrella term is age assurance. Verification tends to be those more sources that can be checked against of some different source, documentary evidence, maybe through open banking, through an EID, through credit reference history data or other such, or a government issued document. That could be in a wallet, it could be a one-off check. And then more recently, you've had estimation approaches, quite a few of which are now well documented. So NIST, for instance, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, reviews and has a clear benchmark, which is looking at facial age estimation, detect a face, analyze, delete the image, where it's had over 12.5 million images where it knew the right answer, and so has been able to check for accuracy and bias. And if you look at the Australian benchmarking that came out in the last few months, you'll see there's over 40 different approaches and a range of other estimation through hand signals and other, how rapid your reflexes, through to inference approaches, perhaps, for example, through, have you got a .edu email, or what other things can be inferred through your online behavior that might have less triangulation of authentication. But absolutely, I would agree with your point, Muffy, about us looking at very clearly the angles of threat vectors, looking at the security angles, looking at data minimization. And that's why a lot of work has been done on the standards. So the first standard was the PAS 1296 2018, then an IEEE, an incoming, an ISO standard with much more specific details, not only about accuracy, but also about configuration. So hopefully that's a helpful framing to get us kicked off.
Yeah, so now what we hear that there's a number of ways to say prove your age or have age estimation, as you just explained. Now, from the user perspective, how is that going to work? And how usable is it going to be? Is the website, for example, who needs me to prove that I'm under 18 or over 18 rather, will require the use of certain types of services, or are there interoperability standards that are emerging to make things easier from the end user perspective? And the second part of the question will be, how much can I trust this third parties that's doing the age estimation or age verification?
Absolutely. So there are now a wide range of different options, and a platform can typically come to a provider that will offer verification, estimation, and inference approaches. They can integrate through one integration, normally in a few hours, and access a wide range of verification, estimation, and inference, do their A/B testing so that they can work out, in Brazil, I'm going to offer these methods in this waterfall approach. In France, I'm going to offer these methods with this approach. They can meet, for example, buffers. The German age body, the KGM, has recently reviewed estimation and said that, for instance, where a few years ago it wanted a 5-year buffer, above the age of 18 for a facial age estimation, that's now a 3-year buffer based on the improved accuracy. So when you land on a platform, normally you'll get offered a set of options. Let me give you the case of Yubo, which is a social media live streaming. They've got an area for teens, 13 to 17, and an area for 18 plus, and it will give you a couple of different approaches to prove that you're, say, 18 plus or say 13 to 17. Obviously, there's a lot more approaches at 18 plus. So it could be at 18 plus, you do have a reusable digital identity wallet with a document, or you do have a driving license, you're happy to do a one-off upload, or there is easy credit reference data about you, or your mobile phone operator, or you have an EID or a bank ID or other such. 13 to 17, you're likely to have fewer approaches, and that's where the estimation and inference might be the only options for somebody at that stage. So you will be offered an option. We're finding that about a quarter of consumers look for reusable options because they're needing to do this quite often. So they're more keen, if they're doing something frequently, to look for a wallet that might have either a documentary proof and or an estimation inside, so that then they're reusing. And also now you're getting wallets, you're getting age tokens. So that was demonstrated through the EU consent project across the age verification providers within our trade body, the Age Verification Providers Association. And you can also have tokens with passkeys. So obviously that is getting to some technical level for people that are maybe new to this area. But absolutely, there are a range of options for companies. They can see, has that been independently assessed to meet, for instance, the PAS 1296, the IEEE, or the incoming ISO 27566 standard. And in terms of interoperability, there are tokenized interoperable approaches. But what is important then is the minimum standards. And that, I think, is where regulators are starting to need to say specifically upfront, for my country, a token can last for this amount of time. What is the duration and what are the minimum standards of the initial age check before it is tokenized? We're seeing from the New York regulator some more specificity, but I think if I were a betting person in the next year, I'd see more details of minimum standards that would have for age checks. If you're doing a document check, this is how good the face match, the liveness, the document authenticity has to be. You can't do multiple uploads of a PDF. So that sort of granular detail so that you have a minimum standard in the bar. So that's what I hope we will get to in the coming period, but allowing my other panelists to come in.
Let me just say, I'm not sure why I'm here anymore because, Julie, I liked everything you said there and agreed with it so much. Thank you. I mean, I was going to bring up the issue of re-authentication at regular intervals, but you already did that. And I think that's key. So there is a role, I think, for the state, and you're talking about this regulation into standards. Someone has to certify that these bodies are doing the processes to the right standard, and I think that has to be the role of the state. But the state doesn't need to be the verifier at all. Maybe one thing I would just comment on about estimation, age estimation, whilst it's still estimation and it's probabilistic, etc., there's something appealing about it to me because there is ground truth. Unlike earlier today, Michel and I wandered into the topic of emotion detection, etc. There is no ground truth there, but there is ground truth with age estimation, and you can test because you know the ages of your subjects, etc. So that's something where I feel that we are sitting on good fundamental science behind it. It doesn't mean technically that maybe it's as good as we would want it to be, but as I said, there is ground truth.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but so what? So I was asking a question about trust. What would make the user of the system trust the verifier, and what should they do if the system using age verification and tells you no, you're under 18, you're not allowed, and I'm in fact 21? Because what I've read from systems that do age verification, age estimation from facial recognition is that it's very hard to tell around the limit. I think for me it wouldn't be difficult to
But
estimate
yeah,
over
no,
18, but
yeah.
and
If you really
so
are 21, then you likely have other forms. You have the right kind of bank account. You have other ways of backing that up.
okay, but so let's take Australia with access to social networks where they have set the limit at 15. So if I'm between 15 and 18, I don't have a bank account, and so I can be left out even though I'm allowed. So is there some remediation processes that are
Could I just
possible?
come in there, Michelle? So one key thing with facial age estimation is that it is not facial recognition. It's
Yeah,
detection
exactly.
of a face, analysis, and deletion of the image. There's no one-to-one recognition, and there's no one-to-many, and there's no unique persistent identifier. So I'll pop in the chat a really useful infographic that was done by the Future of Privacy Forum a few years ago to help separate that out so that it's clear that this is detection and analysis or characterization, but it's not a unique recognition. It involves the face, but without recognizing. And so if you come back, I do this sometimes. I go on holiday, I do a facial age estimation before, and it's not good. I come back and I look 5 years younger because it's not recognizing that it's me coming back. So within 2 weeks, the elixir of eternal youth has knocked me down a few years. It's clearly not recognizing that I'm the same person coming back.
Unless you've got a suntan in which you probably aged your skin.
Could well have done, could well have done. But to your point with regards, it's actually 16 plus in Australia. One of the
Right.
things the Australian government has said really clearly is their main focus is on the youngest users and the highest risk factors. It will not be an offence for the young person that is misaged that is under 16, but specifically for their First Nations, Torres Strait Islanders, not enough of them, or there's a lower percentage that have other forms of documentary evidence, such as, say, a driving license. They don't have something like a proof of age card system in Australia that you could upload and do an API check. So they will need to either develop those other vouching mechanisms with proof of age cards, or they have to look at estimation and inference in order to be inclusive at that 16 age bracket. So actually our facial age estimation is 0.9 years of accuracy. So under 1 year of accuracy at 16 and 17. Usefully, that's the most accurate level. But even there, we had wondered if the regulator would require a buffer, such as the German regulator for adult content at 18 sets a 3-year buffer. However, in Australia, because there aren't as many options at 16, and it's not illegal for that 15-year-old to access, and actually the 15-year-old could be 15 and 10 months or 15 and 11 months, they're weighing on the balance of false positives, false negatives, true positives, true negatives, and looking at inclusion. So absolutely, it will be a sad case for, that 18-year-old that looks really young, and they're probably the same one that knows that because they get carded when they go into bars. So they've probably thought it is worth me investing in a provisional or a driving license because I'm getting asked all this all the time because I really do look younger, which will serve them later in life. And yes, the regulator is then accepting that there will be some 15-year-olds that will get through, but there will be a lot fewer under 12s and under 10s that will get through versus today's system of somebody ticking the box and saying I'm over 13 or over 18. So those are the trade-offs, but absolutely most platforms are looking to offer several options on the estimation inference for that younger demographic.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions already in the chat here. So one is about, what should be the barrier according to the how critical the situation is. So for example, people in different the example there mentioned is people in different age groups may be eligible for discounts. For example, a more older person, I suppose. And so for what this person mentioned as light use cases, people want a lighter process as well. And so what is, I mean, is face, age estimation through face analysis, is that considered the lightest of processes? Or because we haven't talked about age inference where you go and see what the person has posted on social media and this and that, and And so what is the gradient of burden on the user, and also level of trust that results from that?
Absolutely. So, in terms of that gradient, it's very individual. So it takes about 1 second to do a facial age estimation. You look behind the scenes, it's doing that pixel level analysis, instant deletion, etc. But it takes about 1 second. If you add that to your reusable wallet in one click, you could be sharing that over 16 or over 18, according to the context. If you're somebody that happily has had an age estimation or an age inference done, you can then tokenize it, which again is another option where those interoperable tokens are accepted. However, if you have a reusable digital identity wallet and you've got a 13 plus in your passport, that also is one click. So there are a number of approaches evolving that can help people. And I think that's where we're starting to see wallets and estimation offer a range of options for citizens. So we, for quite a few years, have offered wallets from 13 plus if you own a passport. In the UK, there's a proof of age card scheme, and we do an API check. So there's a 13 to 15 card, a 16 and an 18. So for quite a few years, for example, in UK cinemas, a 15-year-old could upload that proof of age card. We do the API check, and at 15 plus in the cinema, they can just show a 15 plus, nothing more. So there are things like that that are evolving in different countries, however.
And can this process happen? We'll talk about maybe a bit about architecture in a bit, but can this be done on device, or does it require that you are sort of connected to the cloud and it's processed in the company's servers?
It's a really good question. So the very first time when you do that age check in order to set up the token, the very first time at the moment, that is something with a facial age estimation that would be done on the browser. After that, you are just sharing from your device with one click. We do on terminals such as retail terminals for self-checkouts and things like that, that sort of on terminal, on device, facial age estimation or scanning a QR to share an over 18. One of the things we've been quite, we've listened very carefully to the businesses that we work with, this, third of the largest global platforms. Up until now, there's been very little appetite for on consumer handset estimation. Maybe that's because they look at, well, what's the parallel with payments? We're sending encrypted payment data through our phones. This is no different. We're doing the facial age estimation and just sharing back the result. However, things like that might change, in the future. But to your point with regards to trust, one of the things that the age check certification scheme has is a trust registry. So all the age verification providers that have been assessed by them, you can check on that trust registry. If you go to Germany, the KGM has a list of organizations which have been reviewed and approved to meet the German standards. And I would hope going forwards that where the international ISO is set up and that is, reviewed, that again, a citizen and or a business would be able to look at that sort of a trust registry to see that a provider such as ourselves has been independently assessed.
And so that leads into the second question we had here. So who would inspect and verify that the providers really do delete those images and do the things properly? One thing that comes to my mind is, I don't know what is the business models of these companies, but I'm sure it would be more appealing to consumers if they can provide the service for free. And then maybe it means that they will be keen on collecting personal data that they can resell and have their business model this way. So, and so maybe it's a question for Muffy in terms of, you said earlier, it should be, the governments that certify these service providers. So how far should this certification go, and what would be understandable in terms of them, in fact, collecting and maybe keeping some of the data to serve their business model?
Yeah, thanks. Interesting scenarios. So I'm sure as users, we would all want this regulated in some way. I would like to be going to a provider that has some stamp in the corner that says, yes, I am regulated and I conform. And my first response would be, well, the state should do that. But regardless of whether it's a state or a collection of companies, that do that. The question is, how do we fund this? Because Mort's question is absolutely valid. I think we do want to be assured that they're not intentionally or unintentionally keeping images. And the question is how to fund it. Because I think we can't just, well, perhaps you think we can, keep piling on responsibilities and jobs for government to do without considering how we're going to pay for that. So how much do we want to pay collectively to ensure this service is done in what we consider to be the right way? And I think that's really a question for in Julie's bodies, but it's questions we need to surface all the time. Whenever you're bringing in new technology, we want it to be regulated. We need to think about how are we going to fund that regulator.
So in our instance, we've set up 20 million digital identity wallets have been set up by citizens for Yoti, reusable digital identity wallets, and the checks that we've done, the almost 1 billion age checks, it's always free for the individual, the business is paying for the check. So that's normally on a volume basis for those age checks. And our business model is zero, advertising. We don't know that it's, Tom or Michelle or Muffy or Julie that's done an age check. We just know that, say, OnlyFans or Lego or Instagram, Facebook dating has received so many checks, and we bill them for that. And frequently it's a sort of volume in the millions model. If it's a supermarket self-checkout, you might have a license model, but free for the individual.
But there is this notion of who is going to fund the regulator to go in and do those random and or regular inspections to ensure that the age verifiers are, not keeping things that they shouldn't be keeping.
So at the moment, we've been audited by one of the big four auditors against the PAS 1296 for about 6 years now, and they're the one that checks that nothing is retained with each of our facial age estimations. We are accredited to the UK Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework, and through that, a review of our digital identity wallet has been undertaken, which shows that we have a non-relational database at the core. We give you the private key on the secure module of your device, and you can just share an over 18 or an under 18 for the NSPCC child line to apply to have a sexting image removed. We do a separate on-premise service for the likes of law enforcement looking at age estimation for assessing ages of victims and perpetrators on CSAM, which is, a different type of model.
Thank you. So I'm still looking at the questions here, and there's a question about zero knowledge proofs. And I know that Muffy, it's one of your topics of interest. I was asking you before we started this webinar about, but the company will know that it is this or that website that asking them for age verification, and say, no, it doesn't have to work this way. So can you tell us more?
Yeah, well, actually, just to refer to the question, I think the question was actually to Julie when you were referring to something, how something was done. And the question was, is that being done in a zero knowledge proof way? And so I'm a great fan of these. And I understand that, there really are a lot of advances. Things have changed in the last 5 years, that it is practical and it is scalable. I'd be interested to know more from the industry point of view. Do you think that's true?
So I definitely think that there are billions of age checks that are happening. There are a whole range of verification, estimation and inference approaches. There's innovation from the likes of the mobile network operators in terms of signals. Absolutely, there are approaches that are based on distributed wallets, of which, we have that example. There are also software as a service basis for large scale facial age estimation. And there is increasing innovation, and I would point people to look at the Australian benchmarking, where you can see 40 plus organizations, and you've got over 1,500 pages of benchmarking data publicly available with technology readiness level, accuracy, circumvention and review across all those different vendors and their solutions and the approaches. So some of them, it concluded that, this is not yet at full commercial scale, but there are a whole range of organizations whose methods are already deployed and at technology readiness level 9, delivering it commercially doing it in a data minimized fashion that are independently audited. And, happy if I'll try and find that link and put it also in the chat if people would like to dig into that.
I think that'd be very interesting.
So now, for people who may not be familiar with this concept of zero knowledge proof, could you give a hint of what it can do?
Right. The whole point is it's based on privacy preserving tokens, so the user asks for authentication from the verifier, from the service. They get some credential. Then they pass that credential to the website or the service that they want to engage with. But that credential is pseudo-anonymized. So the website knows that a credential is coming, but they don't really know whose credential. They don't know any personal information about it. And that's the key. So they do it over a series of negotiations. But the key thing is that credential itself has been pseudo-anonymized. It's not the credential that says Muffy is an older woman.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the key there is that the user contacts the authentication service, gets something in return, passes it on to the website. So neither the website knows how the age was verified, nor the age verifier knows who's asking. And I think it's important to spell this out so it's clear, because I think it's a key element of building trust.
Yeah. And that's the whole point. We really want to separate out who needed age verification to contact that website. They're quite separate issues. So the website just doesn't know that. And then therefore they're not vulnerable.
Exactly. So there was another point in the chat here from Vitaly about biometric passports. I think we all have passports, and we know how this works when we go around. And so I think the question here is, why can't you have a separate security group in the passport with your birth year only? And so when the people need to have their age verified, they could just tap the passport with their mobile device, and the service provider would get and verify that. So but that, to me, that evokes questions about how easy would it be to cheat those systems, because I'm the kid, I want to get my access to Facebook, I'm going to get my father's passport, which is in the drawer, and then tap it on their phone, and then on we go. So how robust are these systems to people who want to cheat?
So there's a lot of work going on with that. In terms of passports, there's over 1 billion people on the planet that don't own a government issued identity document. And that was one of the reasons why the sort of estimation and inference approach has evolved. Then there's a chunk more people who someone else controls that. So most parents control that for the kid. A lot of spouses control that. And then there's also the instance that people don't always want to travel around with them. We know in the UK there's 1 million driving licenses and 400,000 passports that get lost and stolen each year. You've got 99 million of them on the lost and stolen at Interpol. On your point about circumvention, one of the things that NIST has done is looked at, what can you do around all sorts of circumvention attacks, be that documents, be that estimation, in 10 minutes with, say, $10 and low skill, versus if you were a committed paedophile and you've got, 10 months, $10,000 and high skill. And now the weird position that we're in with the likes of sort of Reddit and search, etc., is that some teenagers over their summer break clubbing together might get, $200 together, intermediate skill because they're good online, and they're creating new vectors. So one of the things that organizations like us have to do is work with ethical hackers. We've even done bounty programs and working with that younger demographic of teen tech gaming students under supervision to look at what are all the different attacks. And that's looking at mask attacks, it's looking at 3D images, it's looking at document tampering, it's looking at uploads, it's looking at injection detection. And this is why we think that regulators need to look at those minimum standards of face match if it's a document, proper document authenticity, liveness detection, not allowing multiple uploads, looking at injection detection, and looking at recognized levels such as NIST 2, NIST 3. and citing that more clearly, because otherwise you can easily get to a race to the bottom. We know that there was a study done by PA Consulting a couple of years ago in the banking arena, and one would hope that our high street banks would be procuring the gold and platinum services, but it transpired that sometimes they were procuring the bronze and silver, even if organisations had the full range. And this is one of the things that in the months following the Online Safety Act that has been highlighted by platforms, is that sometimes they've been saying to their age providers that could provide the gold and platinum, we only really want you to do a bronze and silver and see if we can get away with it. Our risk tolerance is pretty high. We just don't want to go to jail. Other than that, we've got quite a high risk tolerance. And so this is where regulators are, I think in the future, are going to have to set a stricter bottom line.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to react to this, Muffy, or...
I'm just musing and thinking, well, this is where ACM can play such a role in actually connecting people involved in making advice for these in their different nations to come together, because you don't want everybody reinventing this wheel. Well, it's not very productive in each country because each country is facing the same kinds of issues. So I know there's ISO, but I'm just saying ACM, you've got a role here.
Thank you.
So I would encourage you to take part in the work stream of the ISO, the 27566, because that has spent about the last 5 years creating an international standard on age assurance that regulators can point to. And then regulators around the world have got a baseline with specific standards that they can work to, that has the privacy and the cybersecurity guidelines thought through, and that has been developed with a lot of industry involvement. And also invite people to participate in the next Global Age Summit in Manchester, and I'll find the link for you for that, which is taking place in the spring of next year. And that will be the third Global Age Summit. So the first one was Manchester, the second one was in Amsterdam, and attracted probably about 40 countries, where they were sending not just the data protection regulator, but also at times the content regulator, sometimes also law enforcement. And there were 40 plus countries that attended last time around the world. So Asia, Latin America, Europe, yeah, a wide range. So please do feel free to look at that. It's the 14th to the 16th of April in Manchester, where there will be another sort of major review of that, the very final stages of the ISO.
Julie, can I ask you, as part of that standard, are there requirements for parity across gender and ethnicity?
So already, if you look at the NIST benchmark, for instance, when NIST has got 12.5 million images and is, pitting vendors against it, it is looking, and there's already sort of the initial proxy was the Fitzpatrick matrix of light, mid, and dark skin tone. And what they've done is they've got sort of about 12 different geographies around the world with skin tone 1 proxy Iceland, skin tone 6 probably proxy Kenya, and all the different ones in between. It's not that easy for somebody that hasn't traveled to all of those areas to automatically know what is light, mid, and dark. But that's the sort of work that has been done with NIST. And if you look at the Australian benchmarking, you can see absolutely they specifically had a stream looking at inclusion for the Torres Strait Island First Nations, and they specifically did the review seeing how did this work, and facial age estimation was one that was deemed to work equally well for that demographic.
Thanks. Thank you. I was reading a long question in the Q&A sort of a panel. I'm not sure how to summarize it, but I guess it's about the fact that the internet is a nasty place in a sense, and we see all sorts of attacks and people who from financial fraud to mass robbery. And using messaging apps to get people to engage, in various activities. And I think the question is in this regard, don't you think that measures to autocratically regulate access to the internet and social media will ultimately fail to achieve the desired result, in that internet security will not improve? then the rest is about, well, maybe if we can have, I think, better content available to everyone and a better digital culture, it would make internet a safer place. I think this is a little bit hopeful given the nature, but that's my personal take on this. But I think, well, feel free to react to this in any way you want, but there is a sense that getting things done on the internet is getting harder and harder, and I feel like we're adding more and more hurdles. And I, of course, can see all the efforts to have all these different methods available and these digital IDs, but we already have accounts and passwords and all that everywhere, and now we're going to add more to it. And so, is there a sense that this is really going to work on the large scale? Or will it collapse for some in one way or the other, which I cannot really imagine at the moment, but where people just give up? I mean, I know personally, I give up on many websites that don't let me say, I know I don't want any cookies, but that's a lot of effort to ask of people to sort of navigate this complex landscape of hurdles that's put in front of them.
It's interesting. We've spoken to platforms that have brought in age assurance, and we've looked at the pattern, for example, in the UK with the Online Safety Act, in France with their implementation of age assurance for adult content. And absolutely, there's a few weeks when people get used to things. And it was probably the same as when, the first time you started tapping your debit card or tapping your Oyster card on a transport system. It's irritating initially when you've got to get used to something new. But within a couple of weeks, people just get the hell on with it, particularly when they find something that takes them about 1 or 2 seconds, or they can set up a reusable approach. So absolutely, we know that it is anything that is change, people will initially not be ecstatic about. However, if you look at the parallel with the automotive industry, it took us 100 years to go from Henry Ford to now. You wouldn't think it normal for you to leave hospital with your baby and just fling them in the back seat. I can remember age 3 or 4 traveling from the north of England to the south of Spain and rocking around in the back of an estate car with tents and siblings and all the rest of it. And people thought that was normal. There weren't any car seats, there weren't any seat belts. There were a lot fewer traffic calming measures than we would anticipate now. And I think in a way, some of these measures are being put in to enable age appropriate experiences. And very rapidly, within a few months, there are approaches that are enabling estimation, inference, and reusability to make it less friction, because it's in none of the platforms' interest that this is high friction, and yet they are having to deal with lots of the fallout, as you can see with the chatbots and the range of parents around the world that have lost young people, lost as in deceased, because of age inappropriate access, and be that conduct, content, contact, contract, or other. If you look at the equivalent with health and safety legislation in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that was pretty new. And then you got used to the fact that you had to have basic health and safety in office and workplaces. And gradually that has come into existence. So I think we're in a time period where there is a lot of innovation in this area. If you look at the age standards work, the Australian benchmarking, and this upcoming summit, you will see how a whole set of regulators are looking at this. So there's a working group of about 40 data protection commissioners around the world on age assurance. There's another working group of the global online safety regulators for content regulators. And there shows that there's quite a bit of collaboration. Absolutely, it's not without challenges for global platforms that are not just looking at age assurance. They've got the likes of the Digital Services Act, and there are nuances still in different countries that are popping up. But one of the things we as a platform aim to do is offer a range of options so that in just a few hours, a small, medium or large platform can integrate and deal with all the age challenges they might face, and try and make that simple and yet be audited and accredited.
Yeah, well, I like the techno optimism, but my experience is that we tend to overestimate how comfortable people are with these things. In fact, I was reading a study a while back showing that Well, there is the sense that older people are less comfortable with going online and doing things like this. I help my mother doing her taxes and a lot of things online. But in fact, the study was also showing that young adults who, especially when they have lower levels of education, are struggling as much. Yes, they are very good at TikTok and Facebook and all that. But when it comes to doing, I don't know, some claims for Social Security or whatnot, they're not comfortable either. And I think here with these technologies, isn't there a risk to yeah to not create but continue a sort of digital divide between those who are fluent with these technologies and are willing to learn how to use them and those who are not and are also the ones who are the most vulnerable to various types of attacks.
So one of the things
Yep.
we've seen in working with, big platforms, so the likes of Facebook dating and Instagram are probably really strong case in point, that they did a lot of time testing with users. And they found across the board that users preferred the estimation approaches. So over 84% of their users, when offered 3 or 4 different options, either the one-off upload of a document or using a reusable wallet, picked a facial age estimation because it was so simple. There was just an oval, put your face here literally in this oval, and 1 second later it had assessed. Absolutely, if they failed that one and they had to go through to another approach, that might be more friction, and maybe they might have to go through to a human and have support and maybe have a vouching from an adult. But on average, the facial age estimation, over 98% of people get through, and it takes about 1 second.
It's interesting. I was very skeptical. I tried a couple myself. But by the way, I was fascinating. By taking off my glasses, I could reduce my age by 10 years. Fantastic. But just to the point you were talking about earlier, I think there are 2 separate issues. One is access to age-appropriate material. And I really feel we just shouldn't give up on that. Just because it's difficult and the web's full of just nasty stuff, well, let's keep facing it. I don't want to just let the law of the jungle go out there. But so access is one thing, and we'll never have anything that's perfect. Then the other issue is usability. Michelle's absolutely right. Usable. And the thing about age estimation, it is so usable. But I do worry in general, the whole thing, banking today is very hard for a lot of people, including myself, taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And we keep building vulnerabilities into the system. For example, I live in fear of losing my phone. I don't think we've really faced that. Sure, I can recover, but it will take 5, 6, 7, 8 days because of multifactorial authentication. I lose my phone. I can't read my email. There's all sorts of things I can't do. Very, very difficult to recover from that. And I'm sorry, I realize that's not quite on topic today, but I would really like us to consider, how did we get into this?
Yes,
That
no,
one
I
little
think,
device,
yeah,
that
no,
one little device, if I lose it, I am stuffed.
yeah, no, I empathize very much with that. And, we spent a long time working out that account backup and what is a proportionate way to do that. And hence also working on lots of alternatives on the age front and doing a lot specifically looking at accessibility. So the WCAG 2.2 AA guidelines for accessibility, which is a wide range. It could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be epileptic, it could be motor, it could be cognitive. So there's ongoing efforts in both the identity community and the age community to continually improve, because that probably is about 20% of the population. If you look across all of those challenges, that there will be a range of users across that fit into those categories. So I do think that is an ongoing area where work is needed, as well as simplification of terms and conditions. So there was work that was needed ahead of the age appropriate design code in the UK, which was to create privacy policies and materials that were written in the language of a 10, 11-year-old, because that is the average reading age and comprehension, specifically for people of all ages and backgrounds. And then similarly, if you're looking at translating into multiple countries around the world to equally ensure that all that language is straightforward and simple to enable a range of people of different educational backgrounds to access. And bizarrely, we also found that helped well with policymakers who also don't always have PhDs in technology, and that actually explaining things simply. So with our white papers on facial age estimation, liveness, and also the injection detection, we try and put them through a sort of an understandability and also create short videos and materials so that either a young person or a parent, teacher, caregiver, civil society, or non-technical policymaker can understand. And I think we have to continually challenge ourselves across the board to make sure that we're explaining things in a way that isn't trying to hoodwink people.
Right, thank you. I'm sorry, I was keeping track of the chat here.
Yeah, I hit some buttons there, didn't I?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, but I think this raises interesting questions of this challenge of the general architecture of the systems, of how much data and processing can occur on your device, which I think makes people more comfortable and interesting the technology, and that their data is not sort of going around on the internet. And as you said, the danger that if you lose your phone, you're really in trouble. But there are also, I think, questions about people are disenfranchised because not everybody has their own smartphone. I remember during COVID, where a lot of courses were being done online, and there were multiple kids in a household, but only one smartphone for the only computer in the house for everyone. And so with this technology, how is like sharing a phone, sharing a computer? Well, I imagine, if you're using face estimation, it's taking your face, so you just put your face in front of the camera. But with the other techniques that are used, how does it take into account those situations where people maybe don't have the paper to create the digital identity? We talked about people who are too young, but there's also plenty other situations that are, I guess, seen as edge cases, as we like to say in computing, but in fact, many people are in this situation of not being able to provide. I'll tell you the thing is, I have a digital identity of my smartphone, and I can't use it because I was born in a town that does not exist as a town anymore, and so it's not registered in the current database of towns. And so when I try to use it, say, oh, this doesn't work because your town doesn't exist. So all these things are, in a sense, very brittle, and I think for people who are one way or the other disenfranchised, can be very, very difficult to address. And so I'd be curious to see how you take into account all these situations.
So across age and identity, I frame it as the 4Ds. There's documents, as in you might not have one, it might be outdated, somebody else might control it, or you might not feel comfortable using it. Then there's devices. It might be a shared device. It might be a hand-me-down device. It might be that you don't have access to one at all, or only, via a library. Then there's the full range of disabilities that, we mentioned. And then there's diversity in that you might have some issue. That could be that your married name is different, your town doesn't exist. It could be that, you've moved from one part of the world where your name had 92 characters and you've moved somewhere and the driving license only has space for 25 characters, and they've just randomly truncated it, and then that doesn't match your other documents, or you've got 3 nationalities, or you've lost your documents. There's all sorts of problems across that diversity element of maybe you transitioning gender is another one coming through. So document, device, disability, diversity, they all offer different challenges. And across reusable identity, transactional identity, and age assurance, at the moment, providers like ourselves are looking at things like what are vouching models, for instance. So where can, if you don't have a document, maybe through somewhere that's your council or through a Department of Work and Pensions or through a school administrator system or through your homeless shelter, people can actually vouch for you. And how can that be done at scale? So if you look at the proof of age card scheme in the UK Citizen Card, they will see if a school administrator rings in and they can assert that these, 50 kids, I declare this is a true likeness of, and provide at least an assertion that that is a human life form, and then assert that they can have a proof of age card. We can do an API check. That doesn't exist everywhere. Identity documents are quite pricey in many parts of the world. That's, more than $80. And again, if they've expired, in some instances, those aren't always used. So what are those other attributes that might exist? It might be that you've given blood. It might be that you've got a qualification. It might be that you've done a course. It might be that you sleep at a certain place with the what 3 words address. There could be in the future other attributes that you could link to a wallet. We've recently started within your Yoti wallet allowing somebody just to have a facial age estimation and an asserted name and number, and that is it, because there might be people that either don't own or feel comfortable using a document-based approach initially for age. And I think there's a lot more that identity companies will need to do in the future, thinking on each of those axes. I know it's something in the UK that Open Identity Exchange did a full paper on, looking at the what could be different government issued data sources that accredited providers might be able to access in the future through Department of Work and Pensions, Department of Education and councils, to enable you to access certain attributes or enable somebody to have that issued to them when they pass an exam or other. But we're still not at the holy grail of making that easy for everyone. That's why at the moment, probably the most helpful thing we've done is the facial age estimation and letting somebody just have that. That either you could do at a self-checkout without owning or having access to a document, or now through the reusable wallet.
Right. I'm trying to, but then maybe pushing this to the extreme, why not have everybody have an implant with, an RFID tag, and so you can just make this a lot simpler for everyone. So I guess behind this is the sense that even if you tell me there's zero knowledge proof, being used, and the images are not taken on, I feel that we are more and more subject to having to conform to a set of constraints to live in an increasingly complex world. And so I guess the question is that commensurate with the threats? So we mentioned before, yes, we should keep being serious on sort of controlling access to certain content. There was a question, in fact, I think by Tom, about how the police and enforcement agencies could use this technology as well, and is there a risk on that side that they could be misused by in fact government itself? So it's a sort of a socio-technical sort of construct that we are sort of putting together that I find can be a little bit oppressive at some point.
So I think you're right to, think how in democratic states we want our relationship with our state to be. There will be areas of the world where it is mandatory to carry a document, in others where people don't think that that is appropriate, that it's mandatory you carry a physical document. I understand from friends that have lived and been brought up in France that there was a time when you literally had to take your papers out if you're going out in the streets. That would be inconceivable this side of the channel. So we know that if you were to go into a casino or a strip joint or a bar in different parts of the world, we have social norms that absolutely they might be fine for somebody aged to go in. Lots of parts of the world that's not been deemed appropriate. So there's been social norms that have been deemed what is appropriate for age of marriage, what is appropriate for age of school, what is appropriate for alcohol, and increasingly now that is turning to pornography. And given that lots of the social platforms are viewed differently in different parts of the world, that's why we're seeing new regulations come in, and we're seeing that it is a political issue for voters and for politicians because of some of the things that have happened in different parts of the world along those vectors of contact, conduct, content, contract. Can an under 18-year-old enter into a contract? What is appropriate in terms of conduct, contact? There's increasing numbers of 0 to 3-year-olds that are going online, and the largest growth in the sort of child sexual abuse vectors is the youngest age category. In terms of that point with regards law enforcement, I know that law enforcement are using this because there are a backlog of tens of millions of child sexual abuse images where humans are having to triage and look at the age of the victims and the perpetrators up until recently, and now the AI facial age estimation is doing part of that. So humans are not spending 3/4 of their working life reviewing those child sexual abuse images and looking at the age of victim and perpetrator. They're able to review and see this is the same image in these 50 cases of the child or the victim and see who they can support. So those are the sorts of use cases that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of much wider because we don't deal with facial recognition, which is, I think, the point that's being raised here, which is much more looking at that surveillance. With a facial age estimation, there is no surveillance. It's detect, analyze, and delete. Nothing is retained. Absolutely, I agree that you need to ensure that those images are deleted. There's no ground truth when you're doing facial age estimations. You can't learn anything from any new check. So we're all human age estimators. I look online and I'd say, Muffy, definitely 21. Michel, maybe, one makes assumptions. We're human estimators. This is doing it. Human guesses with 6 to 8 years of accuracy. The technology is under 1 year of accuracy for some ages, 2 to 4 years of accuracy as we get older, because it has a lot more ground truth. I think that is very different than the uses of live facial recognition, which are growing. That is quite a different category. And in terms of the sort of social technical, I think I personally would be more concerned with what people are sharing online, what adults are sharing about their kids and sharenting online. And the fraud attacks, the romance frauds, the cases where people's sextortion. We've got rising cases of young people and whole grooming gangs looking at financial sextortion as a way of living. Those are the things that keep me more awake at night than the thought that somebody is spending 1 second to prove their age to access adult content.
So I was misled by looking at the question, but if I could just follow on, I think the key word here is social norm, because some of these technologies are getting so good, like age estimation. Yes, when you get it wrong, who's going to be liable for the mistake? And similarly with live facial recognition, I have no fears about the technology. They're getting better and better and better. In the UK, when it's used by police, particularly Met Police, it's against a watch list. So that's very important. What is the watch list? And the watch list is people who are out on warrant. There's a warrant for their arrest. So it's only looking for people. It's used to look for people for whom there is a warrant. And the other feature that's very important is what's the threshold, the matching threshold? How high is it? So do you need to be concerned about false positives, false negatives, etc.? And the technology has improved so much now, particularly with respect to protected characteristics, that I don't think false positives is a problem. And also deletion. Deletion occurs within seconds of the match being attempted. If it doesn't succeed, it's deleted and it's blurred for anyone watching. The interesting question is, what do we do when a match has been made? What's the social norm? Do we want a police officer to go and speak to someone in the street and say, excuse me? That's what it's about. They have good evidence to suspect that is the person. The question is then, how much do we want people to be actively stopping people in the street and then saying, I think we have a warrant out for your arrest? And how do they conduct that conversation rather than the technology per se? And I think the same thing's maybe happening with the estimator. The estimators are getting better and better. It's then what are people doing with it? Maybe that's too far, but anyway, that's my take on facial recognition, which is very different from estimation because it's against
Right, right.
the key is in the word recognizing. You're recognizing it against something.
Well, and so would providers of these age verification systems be allowed to use a database of faces and match against those faces? And so to use to use face recognition as a way to do age verification?
I don't think anyone would have the slightest interest in that because
Why
nobody
would they?
wants the PII. Yeah.
Who
But
Well,
wants
this
to
but
is,
do that? Who wants to
yeah,
hold the? Where did they get the faces from? What's the watch
yeah,
list? Oh,
well,
no,
geez.
yeah.
but wait a
Mm.
minute, because you have zillions of images on the internet that you can clearly attach to individuals. And for, I mean, you can buy for a few $100s databases of, everybody pretty much address and age and the date of birth and all this stuff. So, I mean, the companies that, feed that to their AI systems know how to do that very efficiently. So I think to me, it's not such an insane possibility to provide that kind of approach.
So are
And
you
so my question
suggest
is that is it well, is it
To
considered
what end?
well, because you can provide a service that is more reliable. I mean, we heard that age verification, there's 1 year window of uncertainty, and with a system that can provide that, or maybe the system say, well, send us all your information, and then we'll do a system that is even more efficient. I think as what I'm trying to say is, as technologists, we and I include myself often are very naive, and humans are very creative in sort of taking advantage of technology in different ways. Um, so I don't
I'd
know.
say
Maybe
we
it's
already
a crazy idea, but
yeah, I mean, we already have verification approaches linked to passport. It's the individual that's in control. And I know I'm only sharing my over 18 from my identity wallet where I've put my document. When I need to do that, I just share the over 18. If I've got another know your customer check, I will agree to share those details. But in general, we as an organization, I know, have been set up to let people share less rather than more, and for them to have that audit trail, making sure that Yoti never knows the whole set of things that Muffy or Julie or Tom, Michelle have done in a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. It's built to be the opposite of mass surveillance. And I would be surprised if, well, some people might vote, and you could say maybe that's what the social platforms already offer, to have all of their details publicly known. But in general, the 20 million people that have set up Yoti, the contract with those individuals is that we don't know what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's data minimized. They have the private key on the secure module of their device, and we've got a non-relational database at the core, hardware security modules, tier 3 data centers, etc., so that we don't know what they're doing. And we have built it so that we don't then monetize the advertising that, Muffy likes chocolate creams and Tom likes donuts, and they don't get adverts for those because we don't store anything about the things they do on a day-to-day basis.
So, Michelle, we don't. No one. We don't want what you're proposing. We don't want to
well,
do it.
so
No.
but no, actually, I'm I'm trying to be devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
So, but what in the current regulation would make such a service not possible? I guess that's the other side of my question is, how do we make this not possible? And I think it's the issue of how the regulators are going to make rules. I mean, we see that, with the AI Act and the DSA and the DMA, there's a lot of bounds put about the number of things you can do with AI. There's the high risk AI and things like this. So, what are going to be the constraints on these services that regulators should put in place? And are these going to be internationally accepted, because with the internet, if I don't like a particular validator service, I can go to someone in some other part of the world where maybe they have less stringent regulation. So I think the international aspect here is also a sort of a possible gap in what we want to regulate and how we want to do it.
So I've just put an example as a case in point for you. So Italy's bringing in age assurance to access adult content in the next month or so, initially for Italy only and then for international providers. And it's been very specific about what the requirements are for age verification providers. So that's just one example. If you look at the New York Safe Online, it's even more specific and says the percentage accuracy. But they all at the heart have the basics of data minimization and specific privacy requirements. If you look at the same with the Digital Services Act and the age assurance requirements there. So I think we're from all the things that I come across, because regulators have been doing this for a while, you're probably best looking at the German KJM raster, because they've reviewed and approved over 100 approaches for age assurance over the last sort of 20 years. And they've probably gone the furthest in saying this is a green, good to go list of approaches for age assurance.
And so there was a question earlier on, do these regulators have the right to then fine those services if they don't follow the rules, if they leak data, if they, so what is the stick?
So interestingly, it varies in different countries.
Let me turn on my light here.
Yeah, so in Germany, upcoming, the German regulators for age access to adult content will be able to go straight to the payment processors, and the payment processors will be able to pull the plug on payments, which is probably one of the most rapid and, given that the old adage, follow the money, way to make enforcement. Versus someone like Ofcom, they write letters, they say, oh, we don't think you're quite meeting this, there's a bit of toing and froing, and then there might be a fine. But you can see by looking in the press that Ofcom has written to over 60 organisations following the input of the Online Safety Act. They're publicly named and shamed, and the legal departments, kick in. So I think it varies country by country, but through regulatory cooperation, they're understanding where the issues are. If you look at the Australian regulator, they've been even more proactive in saying up front, this is the signals you have to look at with VPNs. They're not leaving that as an after conversation. They're going more in the direction that gambling authorities have gone in, saying that you have to look at signals around VPNs. And it's not enough just to say, oh, this is a bunch of VPNs. They're going to want to know from platforms that they know have, 5, 10, 15% of 3 to 13 or 3 to 15-year-olds on their site. How many have you removed? We've done polls ahead of time. We know roughly how many 3 to 15-year-olds are on your site now. We're going to ask you how many have been removed. And that's the sort of evidence that some of those platforms will be required to provide in their transparency reporting.
Good. I'm going to read the question that showed up in the Q&A section, not in the main chat. So I would be thankful if our guests could share any insights they have on ethical hazards in the development and deployment of such systems. The workshop, I guess the webinar highlights surveillance by design risks, for example, but could you identify some specific risks such as problematic use cases, architectures, function creep, or maybe could you identify specific ethical red lines that would never be crossed in your opinion, that should never be crossed in your opinion? Okay, so that's
I spend a lot of time looking at this. So one of the things that we've set up at YOSI is an independent group of experts of human rights, consumer rights, last mile tech accessibility, online harms, and they meet quarterly to hold us to account. And there's a whole range of different things where I could give examples of red lines that they've put in. So one example was where we had organisations looking at citizen voting, and our guardians quite clearly said to us, we don't think you should get involved in citizen voting. If it were the case of regulated officials, maybe in a pandemic situation or at a hospital bed wanting to vote remotely, perhaps where it's a one-on-one authentication to vote for a senior chamber, but they didn't think that we should get involved in citizen voting because of the angles around that. Absolutely, in terms of things like facial age estimation, we think there should be that independent assessment that the images are instantly deleted, that there is a minimum standard of how good, be it identity checks are, be it age checks are. So on the age estimation checks where it's linked to a facial biometric, what is the source of that data? Is it reviewed and publicly benchmarked, such as by NIST or the Australian benchmarking? Is there bounty hunting and ethical hacking to prod and look at it? Where is it deployed? So we did an exercise actually with using the .everyone consequences scanning matrix way back, where we looked at what would be the worst thing you could do with this, and somebody came up with, well, if you were in a nation state that was recruiting for child soldiers, could you use this sort of thing in a shoot 'em up game to try and work out which are the most trigger happy 7-year-olds that are in orphanages or whatever? And this was the sort of exercise that we ran way back in 2018, looking at those positive, negative, intended, unintended consequences. And across all of our product life cycle, we've incorporated this sort of ethical review. And then the same, obviously, now we have that with the AI ethics review that's required. Our sort of quarterly sessions, you can find all the meetings online, and our guardians are listed there. They're people who are independent experts whose reputation in their field is more important to them than their affiliation to us, and that's one of the reasons why we work with them, just as one organization. And through the trade body, things that we've done is obviously the classic code of conduct, but looking at these minimum standards and sharing lessons learnt after the first few months of the Online Safety Act, looking at things like circumvention and injection detection to see where could the industry be brought into disrepute, which is where these minimum standards come in. So we do, as a trade body, go back to the regulator where we think there are things that they should be looking at more constructively, but also thoughtfully, to avoid, as I mentioned that example in the banking industry, a race to the bottom of things that could be, the equivalent of the German emission scandals, things that do bring the industry to disrepute. So that's just a few things, given that we haven't got forever.
And so, Muffy, any ethical red lines or problematic use cases that you can think of?
Well, I love Julie's response just there, and I like what she typed in about the Italy model. There's the red lines: no names, no biometric templates, no identifiers. And I think an important thing here is this is about age verification, not more. And by keeping it narrow, it's still pretty broad. The use cases are so broad, but thinking about what are the consequences of using this technology in that use cases, what are the implications down the line? And for example, saying, don't use it in voting. I really like that. That's very good thinking, I think, anticipating problems before they occur. But it sounds like it's I would say I'm quite impressed because you're keeping the community tight and focused on the issue of age estimation, not trying to do not starting to talk about, sort of example, facial recognition, which is very different. And that I would have said is a red line. Don't go there. Despite Michel trying to lead you astray.
Well, I'm just trying to think of the dark side as well as the bright side of technology. I don't think there's any inherently good or bad technology, but technology is not neutral anymore. So it's how it gets used. I mean, clearly, what we heard from Julie and about IoT is they're really focused on that on that activity. But we also see that in the world of technology, you have these large organizations who do all sorts of things. I don't know what is your take on who is going to get into that market. beyond YOT, who's already got a pretty large part of it. But as it becomes more and more mandated for accessing websites and social networks and other things, I'm sure other and probably some of the big companies will want to be part of this. And isn't there a risk there that because they also have other activities, they'll be tempted to not have the kind of insulation that you were just talking about?
Yeah, so Google has already built a facial age estimation that you can see on the ACCS registry from several years ago. We know that initially some of the adult content platforms said, great, we'll do this. We know through the AATT benchmarking that quite a lot of organizations would like to build their own inference and estimation models. So, it is going to be a movable feast. There will be approaches from different areas. We hope that through the NIST benchmarking, that will at least show the accuracy levels. We hope that through the working group of data protection regulators, they will keep a weather eye on what are the sources. But we've often put in consultation responses to data protection regulators, are you looking at the sources of data that people are using to build these systems? And has that data been sourced responsibly in accordance with the data protection regs? And is the image instantly being deleted? I put in the chat there that in the recent Australia benchmarking, it wasn't cited which organization, but there were some US organizations that had stated that a state AG office in the US could request certain information. And so because of that, preemptively, they were deciding to store some information. Now, not a lot of data was given around that, but that's the sort of thing that I would hope more people that are in independent bodies try and say, that's something to, keep tabs on. We know at the moment that lots of platforms rely heavily on parental controls. So more evidence as to are those actually working? Because some of the things that have been put forward have been operating system level checks, which would require a parent in the loop. And from all the evidence that we've got so far, for instance, 1% of parents getting to grips with parental controls on Snap. And there's a whole range of stats from across the world of shared devices, hand-me-down devices. If it's the parents required to be in the loop at each device level, that could be pretty problematic in those shared and hand-me-down device situations, which even in the UK, we've got a high percentage of kids that get hand-me-down devices and a high percentage that are shared. So across the world, that is quite interesting, given that a lot of the adult content and social media platforms are advocating for operating system level checks when necessarily there's a parent in the loop. We saw from the Senate testimony of the CEO of Snap that 1% of parents are using those parental controls on Snap. So if that's the case, just from one platform, how many parents, particularly children in less advantaged family settings, would be protected by that sort of check is something that, we need to ponder.
Thank you. We're getting to the end of this session. I'm going to end this by asking both of you a question that was suggested by Tom, actually. What should policymakers, technologists, and civil society be paying attention to now that I'll start again. What should policymakers, technologists, and civil society be paying attention to now that is not yet getting enough attention in this debate and in the press and in the global news?
Did you want to go first, Muffy, or I'm happy to give
No, I didn't want to go first.
Okay,
it's a tough one. Yeah, you have to blame Tom for it.
The simple thing is what came up today is who and how is inspection done to ensure that deletion is occurring? Who and how's it paid for? Let's do this sensibly.
And that's really the job for policymakers to figure out.
But I think they need to do it with
the
these
aid of
other bodies
technologies
as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I think that's a great and simple and succinct conclusion. I mean, a lot of people would ask about interoperability, and I would say there are already interoperable tokenized age assurance approaches developing, also with passkeys. I think that accessibility point is one that we all need to look at. So those people without devices or shared devices, because there's lots of talk about, using signals, people with disability and more mandating of those WC guidelines, more transparency as to where data is being sourced from, and these minimum standards. That, I think, would be the thing that I think will hold our industry in better esteem in the future and give ultimately better service to the public if we do have clearer minimum standards, not just in one or two countries, but across the board. So hence why this international summit upcoming, the Global Age Summit, I think should be useful, because it will get more people understanding this new ISO standard, which has configuration management, and hopefully will bring more states up to speed with what this standard is and how to bring in minimum standards.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been 90 minutes. This is all the time we have today. So thank you, Julie, and thank you, Muffy, for this very interesting debate and lots of information. And thank you for the attendees who also asked very interesting questions. So we're going to stop here, and I wish everybody happy rest of the day, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, like here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting us. I've put my details there if anyone wanted to follow up or thought I didn't answer enough their questions.
Yes. And the session was recorded, and I think it then is made available from the ACM website. So